Hello again. Welcome back to the third and final module of Inclusive Cities Dialogues. In this module, we will look at how to ensure all city residents are able to access decent work and livelihoods. Quality jobs and decent work are about dignity, equality, fair income, and safe working conditions. Decent work puts people at the center of the work agenda. Job creation provides opportunities for work that is productive and delivers a fair income. Rights at work ensure safety and security in the workplace. Social protection is provided for individuals and families. Social dialogue gives people the freedom to express their concerns, organize and participate in the decisions that affect their lives. Gender equality is an issue that cross-cuts all of the other issues. So, why is lack of decent work and livelihood a salient urban issue? There are many reasons. But in general, we know that 1. Lack of decent work widens the gap between the rich and the poor, and this rising inequality contributes to a range of social and political ills and stalls human development. 2. The pandemic was devastating for workers of all kinds, many of whom became unemployed due to associated economic shocks. This highlighted the need for stronger social protection systems that provide a safety net for both formal and informal workers as part of a more comprehensive, long-term approach to supporting better employment and livelihood options. 3. The digital gig economy is an option for some unemployed or informal workers, but there is still a real digital divide in many urban areas. For example, a World Bank study in 2021 showed that only 1.2 million Indonesian workers can be categorized as digital gig workers. They are usually relatively young, whose age is around 35 years, 87% are in urban areas, 74% have upper secondary education, and 85% are male. This excludes a lot of workers in Indonesia, i.e., those who are less educated, and women. Urban governance has been largely exclusionary, which means that the benefits of urban growth have not been equitably distributed. The impact of COVID has been disproportionately felt by some groups and has been felt along contours of existing inequities. The urban poor is a sizable group that is largely engaged in informal labor that does not meet decent work criteria. In ASEAN, there are as many as 244 million people engaged in informal employment, and some of the highest rates in the world. This represents as much as 78.6% of the region's workforce aged 15 and older. The urban poor is composed of a number of often intersecting groups marginalized within the urban context. For example, informal workers in Cambodia really suffered when COVID struck. 3 in 5 reported they were unable to meet their daily needs, and 4 in 5 reduced their food expenditure. But women informal workers fared worse than men, and people with disabilities fared worst of all. In Coron, Philippines, the tourism boom led many people to shift their livelihoods. Land prices rose and migration increased. When COVID hit, many including migrants were left with no livelihood. The lack of decent work for the urban poor persists largely because of systematic and structural issues. First, the urban poor tend to work in low-paid and precarious jobs, thus lacking meaningful protections at work. Increasingly, many work in the gig economy or are self-employed, home-based, or work in the informal economy. Many are part of already marginalized communities. They are women, the elderly, the poor, migrants, ethnic minorities, and people with disabilities. These groups are already undervalued and deprioritized in urban governance. So their contributions to urban life, social, cultural, political, and economic, are also undervalued or even invisible. But we know that, for example, informal and gig workers are hugely important for urban economies and communities. They are vital contributors to economic growth, health and nutrition, and safety of cities. In the streets and markets, vendors provide an accessible source of low-cost goods and services to city residents, while waste pickers collect and recycle what would otherwise end up in costly landfills or on the streets. Less visibly, home-based workers produce goods that add value to domestic and international supply chains, while domestic workers make it possible for others to work in the formal economy. Contrary to mainstream assumptions, many urban informal and migrant workers also contribute to national and municipal revenue by paying fees to use public space and value-added taxes on inputs and raw materials. Ultimately, valuing them more and investing in decent work for them would add even more to urban economies. Let's find the ways we can support them more in our cities.